I sit here, a broken man, lost and bewildered, terrified and heartbroken. I've lost my little girl. I don't know if I'll ever get to see her again. Some time ago, my wife and I had separated. I was glad to be rid of her, but there was one thing that connected us both that I would never part with. My little 4-year-old girl, Evelyn, or as she preferred, Evie. A little oddball who always kept me smiling with her incredible questioning and love of things that were just unconventional. She dismissed princesses in favor of being an alligator. She would watch me play video games and yell that my mana was low. She refused to listen to classic or pandering bedtime stories and always demanded a synopsis of how to make a food dish or go to sleep watching a documentary of some kind. Every day, I miss her, and my heart breaks as I describe her. Just outside my hometown, there is a winding piece of road that crosses a hill range. The road is named Harris Grade, a precarious drive, especially during a fog at night. A verdant green sea of trees can be seen from both sides, with places of jagged rock jutting out here and there. This place winds and winds, with blind spots around every corner. Sharp turns without safety net from the steep and precarious drops downward. In my time, I've heard of many deaths. You can see the tiny shrines erected to departed friends and family at the places where the road claimed them. Memorials covered in flowers, pictures, crosses, saints, and toys. A reminder of the road's ability to take life. One night, I was driving from my hometown to the next one over. I had to return Evie to her mother that night after our 1 week in a month visitation. Evie was in the back seat playing with a music box I had just got her. It was in the shape of a circus tent that, when you popped the big top, a clown and an elephant danced around in a circle to this cross of lullaby and circus music. She loved it the second she heard it and begged for me to buy it before going home, even threatening to continuously make
"Whap! Whap!"
sounds until I got it for her. Naturally, I caved in.
"Daddy, I'm feeling sleepy. Tell me a story. A scary one, too. I'm sick of that time you beat Lee Cax's high score,"
she asked as she wiped her eyes. I know. How about the one about Agnes?" I said. I proceeded to tell her the tale that had been passed down to me for some time and that had been passed down to my mother. This road between the valleys has long since cut people's lives short, even as far back as during the 20th century. There's a legend that a woman known only as Agnes lost her life and the life of her children on the road late one foggy night. They say that she drove her horse-drawn carriage through the foggy path. She tumbled to her and her children's death. Since then, it's been told time and time again of the legend of Agnes wandering this road at night, that she is here cursing the road like a spiteful spirit in order to plunge people to their deaths like she did so many nights ago, and that if a child is in the back seat, she'll think it's her own child, and she'll try and steal it from the parent. I was proud of getting the chance to tell my girl that story. Of course, though, she had to bring me back to reality.
"That story sucked. No blood, no monsters, not even a psycho with a hockey mask."
She yawned and berated me, but the job was still done. She closed the music box, and her eyes, and soon fell asleep, laying her head down on the middle of the back seat. I laughed a little as I drove. Continuously looking back to check on her. She was sleeping soundlessly every time. As I reached the summit of the drive, a thick fog had begun to roll in. It obscured my view so badly that I began to drive at a much less acceleration. Thick with dark grays and blacks, the fog rolled over my car, enveloping it in a sea of blinding, silent mist. As I was contemplating how to navigate this, the music box suddenly started playing. Damn old thing made me jump, hitting my head on the roof of the car. I looked back into the back seat. Evie was still asleep, but the music box was open. I reached back and picked it up. With only the light of the dash, I could see the tiny creepy clown and his pachyderm partner. I closed it shut and laid it on my passenger side seat. Shaking my head, I put my attention forward again. I checked the rearview mirror to check on Evie. My eyes grew wide at what I saw. Anger and fear overtook me as I looked into the back seat where I had expected to see my slumbering little angel. Instead, I met the gaze of something out of the dark recesses of the unknown. This thing wore the clothes of a woman from the late 1900s. The white blouse and dress covered in caked dirt and dried blood. A crushed bonnet of white with pale blue ribbons topped her head. Her face will always haunt me for the rest of my days. The skin was a putrid gray and green, dried and cracked where the skin folded and moved. The lips were pulled back, showing its disgusting black and yellow gums that held broken and decaying teeth. Its eyes were black sockets of nothingness that seemed to penetrate my will and determination. Long wisps of what used to be blonde hair fell out from under the bonnet, framing the corpse-like face. Terrible long claws were holding my daughter tightly to her ancient dress, stroking her almost lovingly.
Daddy?
Evie whimpered as she stared wide-eyed at me, tears streaming down her face. The sight of my daughter in her hands took control of me as my love and instincts drove me to disregard my safety or the fact that the car was still in motion. I clutched at the thing's hands, trying to break my daughter free. It only gripped tighter. The second hand reached out and slashed at my face, making me reel backwards into the confined space. As I hit the steering wheel, I suddenly felt weightless. I looked around for a second and realized we were falling. The car had driven itself off the cliff without the driver's attention. The last thing I saw before the car made impact was my daughter reaching for my hand from the thing's grasp. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body in agony and screaming pain. I looked around and saw that my legs and one of my arms were in casts. A nurse was in the room, and as soon as she saw my eyes flutter open, she darted out. In a moment, as I was still wondering where I was and where Evie was, a cop entered the room. Immediately seeing someone who might provide some answers, I berated him. "What's going on? What happened? Where the fuck is my daughter?" He spoke in an even tone.
"Sir, you went off the grade last night in the fog. When you didn't arrive at your destination, your wife thought that you had abducted your daughter."
I rolled my eyes a bit. "Yes, and where is my daughter?" He labored a bit as he pulled his hat off.
"Son, when we found you, your car was nothing more than a mangled piece of machinery, wrapped around a tree at the bottom of the hillside. You were pretty broken up, as you can see."
He pointed his hat to my casted limbs.
"We got you out of here, though."
Where is my daughter? I said through gritted teeth. He heaved a heavy sigh, and finally, in an exasperated sigh, he looked quietly at me.
We don't know. We were just about to ask you the same question. No body, no trace of your little girl was found in or around the wreckage.
I could feel the tears well up in my eyes. Nothing at all? He nodded.
The only thing we found was this.
He pulled out a tiny circus tent and opened it. The music of that circus lullaby filling the room. He laid it on the table next to my broken right arm.
We will keep looking, but for now, you get yourself some rest.
He left, an obvious look of hopelessness in his face. Evelyn. I started to cry. I suddenly awoke to a sound. It was the music playing. I had fallen asleep. The hospital room was dark, only a few small shafts of light coming in from the door window. I looked to my right and saw the tiny elephant dancing with the clown. I couldn't help but start to tear up again. Suddenly, the door swung open. Catching my attention, I looked over into the darkness of the room. There was my little Evie. Except something was wrong. She was dressed in an old dress. The kind of dress you see at the turn of the century. A bonnet topping her head, framing an almost cherubic-like face. Her hair done up in tiny curls. She walked forward to me. Slowly I could see her face. Her face was so pale, so white. Evie! Evie? I choked out.
Daddy, it's okay. She says she's my mommy. She's gonna take care of me. Don't cry, Daddy. I'll be okay. And I have playmates too. Lots of other kids she's adopted. Mama Agnes is gonna take care of us forever. I love you, Daddy.
Tears fell from my face as I watched her slowly walk back towards the door. There, standing in the doorway, was a woman. A beautiful woman, dressed in late 1900s American fashion. The blouse, the bonnet, the flowing dress, all were perfect white with ribbons of blue. Her face was of alabaster where the light hit her, like a statue. Staring at me with a smile as she ushered my little girl out of the room. She turned, her white and beautiful face suddenly melting away to that old corpse I had fought in the car. Anger and rage filled my tear-stricken eyes, and all I could do was stare as she took my little girl away, as I lay in the hospital bed, impotent to do anything. As the door shut, the music suddenly stopped, and I was left in darkness and silence. I stayed up all night, watching out of the windows for the sun rise over those hills that make up the grade. Sometime in the morning, The same police officer from the previous day came in timidly.
Sir, we found your daughter.
I nodded quietly, patiently waiting to hear the news that I already knew. He continued.
We found her.
He hesitated a moment as I stared out the window.
It appeared she had been thrown from the car before the impact.
What was the cause of death? I asked flatly.
Exposure. She didn't appear to have suffered much physical damage from the crash itself, save for some bruises on her arms.
I looked at him. Can I see? I asked as strongly as I could, knowing full well that pictures would have been taken. He walked over, pulling a small piece of paper from his jacket, and handed it to me timidly.
I'm sorry for your loss,
he said sadly. I stared down. It was a small, printed picture. Evie, my little Evie, was sitting in the middle of a small clearing of rocks. She was frozen in place, rigor mortis setting her in a statue. The pose that she was trapped in suggested that she had been in someone's arms while she succumbed to the elements. Her head was cocked to the side, as if to lay on someone's chest. The bruises on her arms were shaped like thin fingers, as if hands had been holding her, lovingly cradling her, while she died, and for some time afterwards.